Well, a very good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Candy Talk here on Herman Manyora's YouTube channel. My name is Evans Okinyi, and it's always my pleasure to have you on board on Kenya's most comprehensive political and public governance analysis show. And this fine morning, I'm here with Wakili Willie Sotiano. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'm also good.
Yes.
And we are now looking at some of these things that are taking place within in a bid to kind of quell the temperatures. And you were saying here that there are certain dates that we have, in fact, our foreign date, you term it odious, so to say. Don't you then think that perhaps the president has done the right thing and has heeded to your call and has decided that, look, let's sit and have a candid conversation on this. Let's check what do we owe other countries.
The devil lies in the details. And for you to understand what the president has done, look at the terms of reference, the TORs of that task force that he was attempting to constitute.
Okay.
The TORs of that task force talks about a financial audit of our debt. Our position is we don't have a problem with the financial audit. We have in our constitution an auditor general, fully empowered, an office funded by the people of Kenya that does financial audits. You cannot set up a task force to illegally take away the functions of the auditor general. What we've been saying that they seem not to understand, what we want is called a forensic audit. The problem is you took debts in the name of the people of Kenya illegally. And to unearth the scam, we don't require a financial audit. We require what is called a forensic audit.
Let's take me through the forensic audit.
Forensic audit looks at the legality. So you start by saying, number one, bring the entire debt book. So you bring the debt register, all the debts that have been taken by the people of Kenya. Then you say number two, bring the laws of Kenya. So you bring the Constitution and you bring the Public Finance Management Act as the second law. Then you say against each debt, you ask, when was it taken? It was taken in this year, 2014, Eurobond. What does the law say? The law says you must get parliamentary approval before you take any debt. So for this Eurobond, do we have parliamentary approval? No. Put it aside. This money, as our laws, our Section 15 PFM Act, you can only take debt for project finance, for development purposes. What project did Eurobond finance? Which road did it build? Which bridge did it build? Which classroom? Which dispensary? Which health center? None. That is odious. So you put aside, we are saying, this money, you took it in our name, there was no parliamentary approval, there was no project that is financed. It's odious. Why should we pay for it?
Okay.
You go through the list of all the debts. Then at the end of it, you say, how much money did you take in the name of the people of Kenya without following the laws of Kenya? You took this much. And as per our own forensic audit that Jimmy Wanjigi has done, the Kenyan people had only approved in the period 2013 to 2023, had only approved for borrowing of approximately 2.4 trillion. That's all that went to Parliament for approval. They took almost 8.4 trillion, which means 6.4 trillion shillings that we know is in our debt book. There was no parliamentary approval, and there was no project it financed.
Okay.
And we are saying, in all fairness, why should the Kenyan people pay for that debt? In all fairness. Because somebody took money in our name and used the money for his own purposes. Let me give you an example. Eurobond as one. In Eurobond, the first Eurobond of 2014, they took $2 billion US. Good. 1 billion, they used part of it to settle retired debt that have been taken by Kibaki, around 600 billion Kenya, 600, it comes around 300, 400 billion was used to pay for that Kibaki's debt. 60% was used to pay settle that debt. 40% came into CBK account. So 1 billion US dollar is accounted for. We accept, thank you. The other 1 billion shillings, we ask, where did it go? And JP Morgan releases, we are stressing now, it comes 1 billion, lands into an account. The beneficiary is redacted, blanked out. The person who is signatory to that account, blacked out. And this happened in 2014. Raila Odinga led a public push to disclose the information. And the information was shared by Treasury, CS Rotich then. So if this $1 billion US didn't come into Kenya, and you have evidence showing that didn't come into Kenya, why should, in all fairness, the poor Kenyan farmer be asked to pay for that $1 billion US?
Wakili, are you by any
Isn't
chance...
that debt odious?
Are you by any chance alleging that there are debts that are taken by the government but end up in private accounts and then the public are required to pay for it?
Yes, and I'm giving you one illustration.
Okay.
Number one is Eurobond. Eurobond 1. $2 billion US, you can only see $1 billion US used to the benefit of the people of Kenya. And $1 billion US, you cannot trace where it went. It went to a private account. And CS Treasury himself released the EFT form that shows you how the money is leaving JP Morgan to an account that they blacked out. And we are saying, why should you ask the people of Kenya to pay for that money? And there are so many other such debts. There was a debt, 400 billion Kenyan shillings, that was taken from some American billionaire. Kenya government never mentioned it. They were quiet. We only came to learn about it when that American billionaire was making his tax income declarations for the year to IRS. So he declared, I've lent the Kenyan government 400 billion Kenyan shillings. Wait a minute. Somebody out there has lent Kenya government 400 billion Kenyan shillings. And he's declared it in the US. It's there, public records. But in Kenya, there's no mention. But you'll find in our books, we are paying. And I also want you to notice this. Since Uhuru came to power, and even after he left, there is no day the Kenyan people have ever defaulted in repaying for their debts. All interests have been paid on time. All principals, when they mature, have been paid. When Uhuru left power, our debt was 7 trillion Kenya shillings. Today, our debt is almost 11 trillion Kenya shillings. And yet we've been paying, faithfully so. How comes in the payment, we are up to date? But in the obligation, the debt, when we have been paying, you will expect the debt to be coming down. But in our case, it keeps going up.
Could it be that we are paying less and borrowing more?
No. The point is very simple. It simply means you are paying for a debt. And as you are paying for that debt, some people are taking new debts without following your laws. And that is what we are saying. Why should the people of Kenya be made to pay for those illegal debts? Because when you talk about somebody has borrowed 6 trillion, 6.4 trillion, do you know what it means? Because in the 10 years of Uhuru, 2013, 2023, as per forensics, our deficit in our debt books, in our budget books, was only 1.3 trillion Kenya shillings.
Okay.
So we ought to have only borrowed 1.3 trillion. But these people borrowed 8.4 trillion. In other words, they borrowed 6.4 trillion beyond what was needed.
Okay.
Now, if in 10 years you needed only 1.3 trillion, in 10 years, they've borrowed an excess of 6.4 trillion. These people have borrowed 60 years ahead. Yeah. It took you 10 years, your deficit was 1.3. They took 8.4, 6.4 trillion more. So they've borrowed 60 years ahead of you. Now, how are you going to make the Kenyan people pay for 60 years of debt? And more so, for project money that didn't come into Kenya. If you pump 1 trillion into this country on project development, because you also, as per our law, you can only take a debt for development, not for recurrent expenditure.
Okay.
Now, if they borrowed 6.4 trillion, if that money came into Kenya, do you know how many roads that will do? With 6.4 trillion, you can actually create and build over 300 level 5 hospitals. That is Kenyatta National Hospital. You can build in all the counties, fully equipped, and you still have money. With 6.4 trillion, you can tarmac. If you've seen tarmac roads that exist in this country, the ones your eyes have seen, you can triple that number of tarmac roads. and still have a surplus.
Okay.
That is what we are talking about. It's the kind of money that if a country had borrowed and it is used locally, the projects and the impact will be so clear. Everybody will be able to see it. We will all be feeling money in our pockets because the money will have been pumped into this economy.
Okay.
But here, we are not seeing any of those projects. We are only seeing a government coming into my pockets to raid it.
Are you seeing, okay, now that of course you put this forth, and I've had even your party leader put these figures ahead of us here, going with the recent proclamations by the president, do you see any deliberate measures to actually solve this problem that we are in?
You see, if William Ruto wants to solve the problem, the remedy is very simple. Just publish, even before you set up a task force, publish, here are your debts as the people of Kenya. All of it is here. All the debts you've taken. These are the projects those debts have gone into.
Isn't that information public?
No.
Is it
the information is not public.
Okay.
You're only given the list of debts. You're not given which projects they are funded. You're not being told which debt has been paid for. And just make that information public. Create a 3-table template. 1 column, all the debts. Column 2, all the projects they financed. And then column 3, repayments that we've made. And we'll be able to say, okay, this one for the American, 400 billion Kenyan shillings. There was no parliamentary approval.
Okay.
There was no project it financed. Why should we pay it? Remove, odious.
Okay.
This Eurobond 1 billion we cannot account for. Didn't land into our CFS account. No project was financing. No parliamentary approval. Remove. We are not paying. And you go through the list, all of them. SGR, for example. You know, SGR, there is all this information in the public. The project was worth 450 billion Kenyan shillings. To be financed by China Exim. Kenya government was to pay 10% contribution towards the project. It was 500 billion. Kenya government to pay 10% contribution. So Kenya Railways pays China Road and Bridge the 10%. Then they go to Exim Bank for drawdown. We made our contribution of 10%. Then the contractor is able to, as he releases his bills, yes, is paid. What happened? Kenya Railways paid to China Road and Bridge up to, not 50 billion, they paid a total of almost 650 billion Kenya shillings as drawdown. Direct payment from Kenya Railways to China Road. China Exim also equally paid to China Road and Bridge 500 billion Kenya shillings. So in other words, where we were supposed to only contribute 50 billion, we paid 650. China Exim paid on our behalf another 500. So a project which was meant to cost 500 billion, China Road and Bridge ended up receiving 1.2 trillion. That SGR, in all fairness, we built it using our own money. In fact, we overpaid for the contract value. But we acquired a debt of 500 billion. Why should we pay for that debt? I'm just asking. And that information I'm saying, I'm not saying that I've sent Secret Service, James Bond, to go and snoop. It's all in the public domain. Just look at how much appropriations, exchequer issues, that were sent to Kenya Railways from our tax revenue. And Kenya Railways sent the money to China Exim. I mean, to China Road. They were meant to send only 50 billion. They sent almost 650 billion. At the same time, China Exim sent to the contractor 500 billion. What are we talking about here? Why should we pay for that loan? I'm just asking. If the Kenyan people think they are sufficiently philanthropic to pay for that loan, fair enough. But I do believe that loan that we have is odious.
Okay.
It's odious to us. Because there was no parliamentary approval for it. There's no project it funded. If you're claiming it funded SGR, SGR we can show you from our exchequer issues. We built it using our own money. So why are we paying for this?
If the president is fully aware of this, why then would he go ahead and form that particular task force?
That to me is the elephant in the room. Who was Uhuru? Who was Jubilee? It was Uhuru and Ruto. So he's continuing with what Uhuru started. They started with Uhuru.
Okay.
They are both culpable. And we must speak the truth. Our truth is, this country will not make any step forward before it addresses the debt problem. And the debt problem that we had here was caused by Jubilee.
Okay.
When Kibaki was leaving power, and I want you to understand this, out of every 100 shillings Kibaki was collecting, debt finance was only taking 18 shillings. 18 out of 100. Which means Kibaki had 82 Kenya shillings to play around with. Run government, do development. That's why you're able to see every roads being done all over this country. Right now, out of every 100 Kenya shillings you're collecting as Kenya government, 80 shillings goes to debt finance. You're left with only 20 shillings. It's impossible to govern. You're actually now an insolvent country.
Okay.
I want to see which formula will move the country forward without looking at the debt. Because it's the albatross hanging on your neck. It's choking you. It is why William Ruto every financial year keeps increasing taxes, levies, and charges. Because he's trying to cushion himself from this debt. The Auditor General, in her audit reports, has raised so many questions about these things. Has also, in her own report, said some of the debts she's not been able to furnish with the information. She's not been given the list of payments up; they're not been supplied. If they have not been supplied to the constitutional office holder, what makes you think they'll be supplied to the task force? Because the Auditor General has not said I'm incapable of doing it.
Okay.
She has actually said, in some instances, we've requested for information about the list of debts and the payments which have been made. She is not given.
Okay.
And we are saying we have no problem. That's financial audit. Let the Auditor General be given everything. Then number two, as we are saying, as that financial audit is going on,
You want forensic
we
audit?
want a forensic audit. That forensic audit will tell us the true story.
Okay.
So that I don't think we deserve to ask how Eurobond, the $1 billion US was used. We don't need to ask the question. As we simply say, somebody took it in our name, we didn't give our approval, didn't finance any project, remove it from our debt books. We not pay. Can't pay, won't pay. Atuna deni. In fact, as per our forensic audit done by Jimmy Wanjigi, the Kenyan people have overpaid for what was legitimately procured in their names by 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings.
What do you think would be the impact of actually failing to pay, defaulting on those loans, whether they're odious or not?
Default will happen whether you like it or not. Default happens when you're unable to pay your debts. So it will happen.
Okay.
As we are simply saying, when you move to a default, let's default on what is legitimate. Let's default on what is genuine. We don't need to default on what is odious. So, of course, there are consequences to a default.
Finally, as we wind up this show, definitely, here we are. The finance bill definitely is off the road right now. So people were actually asking what next. But when the president had a conversation with the journalist the other day, he talked of, do you know what this means? He talked of us borrowing 1 trillion. Then a day after, I saw him change the tune of maybe we can reduce things and now we'll just borrow the deficit of what was supposed to be raised by this particular finance bill. Where is the confusion and why are we getting all these things?
That is why I tell you there's a problem with the thinking.
Okay.
That President Ruto can stand up and say, I will borrow 1 trillion because of the rejected finance bill. Does he even understand what budgeting is? Why 1 trillion? And who gave him the authority to borrow 1 trillion? Because you only borrow money to fund a project. So which project is this that is now starved of cash? Then drop the project. He cannot just go out there and say, I'm borrowing 1 trillion in whose name? Okay. That is what they've been doing. They've been going out there borrowing money in your name illegally, and the only thing you are getting is the obligation to pay for that loan. When the loan itself does not even end up in Kenya. So that cannot work.
Okay.
That is the thinking. That is what they've been doing. In fact, to me, that was just an opportunity that he misspoke to tell us exactly what they've been doing.
Okay.
That he can say, okay, I'll borrow now 1 trillion Kenya shillings. 1 trillion for what? Who allowed you to borrow 1 trillion? What project was going to finance? Where did you get parliamentary approval for that debt? He didn't.
Okay.
And he's not the alpha and omega in this country. He's subject to the laws of this nation. And he must abide by them. Unfortunately for him, this is the year 2024. It's not 1984. 1984 came and passed.
Okay.
This is the era of Gen Z. The people are more enlightened. The people are able to question and will question him.
Okay.
He will not borrow any 1 trillion Kenya shillings. And if William Ruto borrows 1 trillion Kenya shillings, him and his lenders will pay for that money, not the people of Kenya.
Okay.
That debt will be odious and will not pay it.
But
That is why we are saying declare them odious. So if anybody wants to lend money to William Ruto, proceed. If you are a local bank, you want to take treasury bonds that are illegal, take it.
Okay.
You are an international lender, you want to give money without following our laws, give it. But the people of Kenya will not pay. Even those treasury bills and bonds,
Okay.
which are procured illegally, we will not pay for it.
Okay.
When we default for that debt, because we are going to default, we will tell you we are not paying for an illegal debt. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's the voice of the people.
But you're saying this step by the president does not even open our debt books?
It does not open our debt books. It's asking for a financial audit. We want a forensic audit of our debts.
We want a forensic audit. That is what Wakili Willis Otieno here says. Of course, he's also the deputy party leader of Sabina party. Ladies and gentlemen, keep it here at Herman Manyora. Keep it here at Candid Talk till we have this conversation again. Have yourself a lovely day, and thank you for listening and for watching. My name is Evans Okini.